Hi, everyone. I know.
Hey.
Hopefully we're going to get a nice group of my followers. I have great people on Substack. And everyone, I wanted to introduce you. If you don't know Melissa Dalton-Bradford, I got to know Melissa on social media. I started watching her posts. I started listening to what she had to say. And I was so impressed, honestly, by her perspective, by her intelligence, her ability to communicate to an audience, to really explain things simply. And I always love the Tom Friedman quote, to explain things simply, you have to understand them deeply,
Deeply.
which I totally agree. To be able to synthesize complicated concepts and make them understandable and digestible, you really have to have a profound understanding of the subject. But anyway, Melissa is an author, public speaker. She's co-founder of two civic engagement nonprofits, for which she was honored with the Distinguished Alumni Award from her alma mater. And what's really interesting, she's written, she's done a lot of things. And I'm going to probably let her talk so I don't keep talking and kind of give
Okay.
us a little more info on her background. But she's coming to us today, everyone, from Frankfurt, Germany. And I sort of feel like Melissa, in a way, is the talking version of The Economist for me. I've always
Oh,
liked reading
wow.
I've always liked reading The Economist because I feel like it gives a perspective that sometimes gets muddied and confused when you're living in a place, to be able to look at events from across the pond. I think I always appreciate the perspective that it gives me, and I feel the same way about Melissa's work. So before we talk about your books, what you've written, how you started having this social media presence, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a tax-paying U.S. citizen, always paid in full, always paid on time. Let's just get that out of the way
Okay,
right
I'll
to
be sure
start
the
off.
IRS knows that, Melissa.
Yeah, we're just gonna megaphone that everywhere just in case Big Brother's watching. But the thing that is important to understand is that I've lived outside of the U.S. for well over half my life, for 35 years. So the first time that I lived outside of the US, our family lived in Austria, and it was my first exposure to real life experience with the survivors of World War II. And then I lived there again when I was 18, and I studied in Vienna, and then worked there again when I was 21. And my husband and I, as newlyweds, moved back to Austria. And now we've lived in Germany for over 15 years. So you can imagine how that colors my worldview. When you
I'm
live
sure.
outside, yeah, you can't help but have a different lens when your circle of friends speak a different language, have a different political philosophy, and also have a different view of your country, right? So I've sat at dinner tables, Katie, where I have talked politics with people in Norway and France and Hong Kong and Singapore and Switzerland, in Vienna, all over the place. Yeah.
So
And
you've really become an international woman of mystery in many ways, Melissa. I mean,
is
you
that
have
it?
such an
We'll underscore the
interesting,
mystery.
sophisticated, what seems to me pretty
Oh,
exotic existence. And when you were born in the United States before you moved, where did you grow up in the States? And tell me at what age you moved to Europe?
oh, this is great. This is great. I was born in Kansas, in a wheat field, literally. And my parents were both professors and moved to different professorships. And then we ended up in the Rocky Mountains. So from the age of about 12 or 13 on, I grew up in a very, very conservative university town in Utah.
Wow.
And
Oh,
from there,
were you at BYU?
I was. I was. Yep. Did my undergrad there, did my grad work there, taught there, have done a lot of work with that university. And um, and then at the age of 13, as I mentioned, my father took sort of an exchange group over to live in Austria for 6 months. That was my first experience standing on foreign soil. And it was strange, Katie, because I felt like, this world exists. I really belong here. I don't know what I was thinking, but I felt very connected with this old world and this sense of history that was lingering everywhere. And I ended up then studying in Vienna and then completed my studies in the States, and it was in German studies.
Hmm.
So the German studies background, both undergrad and grad work, helped me to appreciate the long history of this country and what they had experienced. And that has all come to the forefront as I've watched my beloved home country go through an extreme change in the last decade, right? We all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and
So,
I wanna dig into that in a moment, but before I do that, Melissa, you
mhm,
have, you've lectured, you've done a lot of different things, and you've written 2 books. You wrote a book on loss
mhm,
because, you lost a child, and I'm so
yes.
sorry that
And
that
I'm
happened.
sorry. I'm sorry also for the trauma that you experienced with your loss. That's something that connects us, and it's another thing that makes me feel this tenderness toward you too, because I've been watching you as a would-be journalist when I studied journalism along with my German studies. But I always looked at Katie Couric, and then when I saw what you experienced and how you responded to that, that was before we ever buried our eldest child, our son, who died tragically trying to save someone else's life.
Mm,
And I remembered at that point, I remembered the way that you responded to the loss of your husband. It meant a lot to me then. I just want you to know that.
mm.
And that was the second book that I wrote. The first book that I wrote was a memoir of our life, what it meant to raise children globally, and what that costs and what that gives. And the very center of that book is this out of the blue loss of our son to a drowning. He went back into the water twice to save
Mm.
someone who couldn't get out of a whirlpool in a canal.
How old was he, Melissa?
He was 18 years and 5 months to the day.
Oh,
And I got the call at 11:15 at night that I needed to drive 5 hours to get to an ICU where he was lying in an induced coma.
mm.
So that is, as you know, being bereaved is a defining identity in many ways. It doesn't limit me, but it has helped me connect with other people specifically because the third book that I worked on was all about refugees. And it
I
may
know,
seem like
which is so, I know you've had such an interesting life and career, and I first of all,
Mhm.
I'm so, so sorry about your son. I think, yes, I
Thank
lost
you.
my
Thank
husband,
you.
I lost my sister. I think losing a child is the most painful, difficult, gutting loss there is. Not that it's a contest, but I am just
Mhm.
so sorry in the prime of his life that this happened to
Thank
him
you.
and happened to your
Thank you.
family.
Thank you.
And I'd love to read that book. What is it called?
It's called On Loss and Living Onward. I'll send you a copy.
Okay,
I'll
I would
send you a
love
signed
that.
copy. Mhm. I'll send
Thank
it to
you.
you.
And I think, I think a lot of people maybe watching would appreciate reading that book. I think we're now as a society, and I'm not going to digress on this too much, but I feel like somehow we are being more heart filled and open and less full of discomfort and shame or whatever it is about talking about loss and grief. And I
Right.
think, it used to be something that was held so privately. Um, and I think that it's so important and cathartic and helpful for people to have a place they can go or people they can talk to or books they can read. That can help them through this excruciatingly painful period of time. So thank you for writing it. And I was
Mhm.
actually also so interested in the fact that you worked with refugees. Tell me a little bit about your work and the book that came from it.
Yeah. Thanks for asking about that because this experience, the first book, which was about moving from country to country to country with a family, by the way, might I underscore, in the most privileged circumstances, and then experiencing traumatic loss right in the middle of a move. We were moving for many years in one country to a whole new place with a whole new language. Everything was new schools, new friends. And it happened exactly in that week that our son, Parker is his name, made that decision to go back into the water, and it cost him his life. And he was in a coma for 3 days. And then we turned off the life support because there was no more brain activity.
Mm.
Not very long after that, we moved again from another country. It was from Switzerland to Germany. And it was exactly the year before the first Trump run for presidency. And it was exactly when the Syrian war broke out. And if everybody remembers, if our audience remembers, this is when there was this tremendous influx of Middle Eastern refugees, and they landed in our neighborhood. They landed hundreds upon hundreds. And I knew, because of how challenging it had been to move in the most privileged circumstances of country to country, I knew these people needed help. And I also knew what it was like, again, in a very privileged circumstance, to lose my beloved, to lose my flesh and blood in one stroke of fate. And I thought, these people are going to get everything that I have to give. So I had taught language on the university level. So a friend and I just walked to the closest, it's in the town that I live right now, the closest, they call it, this is a big German word, you'll have to forgive me, everybody, Erste Aufnahmeeinrichtung, which means a first reception center. It was a high school gym. It was a high school gym that had been converted over the weekend into a place to house 160 freshly arrived refugees. These people were still wearing the flip-flops that they had fled in. They had injuries. They had one backpack. And we had no common tongue, but I started teaching them German. This ended up being a whole decade of activity because we founded a nonprofit that would tell their stories. We continued to follow their stories. I went to Bangladesh. I was on the Syrian border.
These were Syrian
Syrian,
refugees?
Iranian, Iraq, Afghan, many, many different places across the Middle East. And I learned for the first time really what it meant to have a political regime, have a regime gut your life. These people had been living lives where they had been holding birthday parties and they had weddings and they had family gatherings, and they would show it to me on their phone. They would pull up their phone because we didn't have any common tongue. And they would say, this was our house before Bashar al-Assad, we just call him Bashar, when he dropped the missiles in Damascus or Aleppo. And here's what it looked like afterwards. And I realized this is the cost of politics. It costs people their entire lives. So that refugee work spanned several years with Middle Eastern refugees here in Germany. COVID hit. We couldn't have the same sort of, obviously, knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder contact. And as soon as COVID lifted, the war began in Ukraine. So guess what I started doing? Started teaching Ukrainians German again, and these people have become my friends of the heart, and I've learned their stories. Here's
So
what it looked like in modern
Ukrainians who had fled to Germany.
Ukrainians that had fled by the thousands upon thousands of hundreds of thousands, who'd made their way through Poland and had come to Germany. And so it's been an entire decade of that work. And all of this has happened while I've been watching from a distance this political landscape transform in my home country, getting
Right.
closer and closer and close. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody listening knows what I'm talking about. Getting closer and closer to a kind of regime that mirrors in some ways these terrible, odious, monstrous systems that cost people not only their safety, but their futures, their children's futures. So,
Can I ask you about
so
that, Melissa? Because,
yeah,
right around that time, my husband John and I took a trip to Budapest and Berlin. And
okay,
I had never been to either cities. And I remember the anti-immigrant sentiment that was really rampant, particularly in Hungary. And and here
yeah,
you are pouring, your heart out to these people who had been displaced through no fault of their own, who wanted to
mhm,
stay in their home country but had no choice but to flee. And do you believe you were talking about the changes in Germany, and obviously it's happened in other countries as well, Hungary. Um, was this precipitated by the influx of immigrants? Is that what you think fueled this move to the right? Not only, we'll talk about America in a moment because that's really the subject of your new book, How to Save Democracy, the Anti-Authoritarian Playbook. It comes out you all September 15th, and make sure everyone knows how to order it, etc. But is that what happened? The anti-immigration sentiment, and could Germany now, with the perspective of about 10 years plus, could the German government have done anything differently. I think Angela Merkel was so, I don't know about you, but she strikes me as somebody who's so wonderful and impressive and
I
just,
think so.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
an incredible human
anyway,
being from my
yeah.
perspective, yeah.
I asked you like 3 questions in one, but what do you think of all those things that I'm wondering about?
We're gonna unpack your questions because they're excellent. They're excellent. They help us understand authoritarianism. Look, yes, this was a lot for Europe to take on, and these were people in desperate need, and they were people of a different look. I'm gonna focus on that for a moment. Authoritarians, as a rule, choose the thing that we might have a little bit of a latent, even unspoken fear about, and then they amplify it. And they do it for a number of reasons. And this is what happened in Hungary. Um, they do it to distract from other naughty stuff that they're doing or incompetent stuff that they're doing. They always pick a scapegoat. And it can be Muslims, it can be Mexicans coming over the southern border, it can be Haitians, it can be Somalis, it can be the LGBTQ community, it can be Dems, it can be communists, whatever. This is what authoritarians do. They wait for that opportunity because they know human nature that if they stoke that latent fear, they've gotcha. They will frame it as us versus them, and they will do entire campaigns to amplify the danger of this other group. Here in Germany, 90 years ago, we saw how a group or groups of people were scapegoated because there was this sort of latent suspicion, centuries of anti-Semitic myths that circulated, right? And so if someone can take that and amplify it, then they have a common enemy, and that's the best way to build your base. And this is what Viktor Orban did in Hungary. We are glad that he's out of office, that the Hungarians, I love them for showing up as never before in history. 80% of the Hungarians, hello, my fellow Americans, 80% of Hungarians showed up at the polls. And it was overwhelmingly the younger generation, the people who had only known this authoritarian, authoritarian leader their whole lives. And they got him out. They got him out. He waged a brutal campaign against migrants. He construed statistics. He blamed them for all sorts of things. He put barbed wire and electrical wire on the borders. He had water cannons on the border, everything to keep these people out. And people were convinced that their quote unquote Christian bastion, which is what they wanted to present Hungary as, they wanted to create a kind of fortress against these dangerous people. Remember, the current occupant of the Oval Office was buddies with Viktor Orban. They were constantly massaging one another's egos because they use the same sort of playbook, and it really is a playbook. So if I can get back to, I don't know, was it question
And
number
by the
two or
way,
number three?
someone just commented, Urban Hermit, who's one of my followers, said, gave the example of Brexit as again another example of
There you
demonizing.
go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my daughter's cat. Don't do that. Is scratching the rug.
None of
Demonizing
that,
immigrants, and that's what
of
happened
course.
with Brexit.
Of course. And I've spent a great deal of time because I was on the road lecturing about this for the last decade, about the actual statistics. There was a small spike in certain kinds of crime right at the beginning. There was chaos, and it wasn't always crime from the immigrant side. It was the German side in response to the fear. But actually, if you follow the statistics, the crime rates have declined steadily over all of these years of assimilating these migrants. Now, admittedly, there are things that Germany could have done better. And Merkel was open about that too. And her cohort, they were open about it, and we know. But it was the first attempt at taking in so many people. The understanding when Merkel said, "Wir schaffen das," which means we can do it, the understanding was that neighboring European countries were also going to do their part. But they didn't. But they didn't, quite simply. And so it landed on Germany's shoulders to house and to fund and to educate and find jobs for and housings for housing for all of these people. So, given the circumstances, I still think that um, I still think that it was morally the right thing to do, and and I'm not going to answer your third question because I've forgotten it, but I'm going to lead
No, what
into
my
another.
third question is the direction, the tilt toward,
Yeah,
authoritarianism
good.
that's happened in your country, in Germany,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
really
that's right.
throughout Europe. If you look at France and you look at other countries,
Yeah.
the aforementioned Brexit, I don't think the British are authoritarians, but they certainly weaponized, immigrants or demonized
Yes.
immigrants rather. But
Yes.
give us a sense of sort of the impact of I mean, what lessons, I guess, is a better way of putting it, Melissa, can the United States learn from what happened in Germany or what is happening in Germany?
What is happening in Germany? Let me describe what's happening in Germany right now. So in 2015, there was already this small, fringy party called the Alternative for Germany. In German, it's called Alternative für Deutschland, AfD. AfD. It's now one of the most powerful political parties in Germany. But what happened back in 2015 is that they kind of pivoted. An they had been a response to the euro. First, it had been a kind of a economists fringy party. They were anti-euro. But then when 2015, 2016 happened with this, again, this influx of the other, these people that you can convince are a danger to your culture, etc., that they're going to overtake you, that they're going to erase you. We're hearing that language in the US. And
The great
it's
replacement theory.
it is it is old stuff. This is old stuff, Katie. This is the same stuff that was circulating 90 years ago. It's just being reused. So the AfD, again, is with their spokesperson, Alice Weidel, is gaining traction. And but in certain areas where sort of the old East Germany, we could talk for a long time about this. Have me back again. We'll talk just
Okay.
about this. Just about this. But it is a growing concern, and it's part of a trend. It's part of a momentum that is moving across parts of the EU, not all, but parts. And it's fear. The driving animus of authoritarianism is fear. If you can get people scared of somebody outside of their country entering their country, somebody inside of their country, somebody who's stabbing your back, another party, another gender, whatever it is, you hold them in control. You hold them in control. It's the strongest motivator. And I always say to my followers, and I mention this several times in my book, just take a breath and look at what you're standing in front of. If you are starting to feel fearful about basic human things, if you're afraid to speak openly, if you're afraid to leave your home and drive to your court appointment to to make sure that your citizenship appeal is legal, then you know you're standing in front of authoritarianism. If we're living in fear, then that's the driving animus. But I just cut you off. What were you going to
No,
say?
no, no, you didn't at all. I wanted to go back to the ADF, is ADF, right?
AFD,
Sorry, I just
Alternative
transposed that,
für,
AFD, because
yeah.
you say they're gaining power. They didn't win the last election, right? I mean, but
But they have, yeah,
they're
they
growing,
came really close.
and
Mhm.
JD Vance came over to Germany to campaign for the AFD candidate, right?
Elon Musk was at a huge AFD rally. I've done a reel on this or several where his face is just emblazoned across a big screen and he's cheering for them. That is because, and I want everyone to hear what I'm saying right now. It's not just foreign actors who are anti-democratic. It's internal actors who are anti-democratic. And the AfD is anti-democratic in the sense that it wants it wants to believe this great replacement theory. It wants only one kind of person who is German, who is allowed here, who is the profile of of the country, very much like what we're watching in the US. Very much. It's just the same sort of playbook. So Vance met with Alice Weidel at the Munich Security Conference. Musk was at one of their rallies. Vance, I believe, was on the campaign trail when Viktor Orban, when they were approaching that last election. These people work in tandem with one another. And the people who are within the administration or behind the administration right now, and we could name all of their names, they are on the record as anti-democratic. They have wield a great deal of power, and it's perilous right now. Should we mention those names or should we not mention those names, Katie?
No,
The
yeah,
people that
sure. Go ahead, please. I'd love you to
well,
mention those
yeah.
names.
Well, we can talk about Peter Thiel. I call him Peter Thiel because he's originally from where I live. He's from Germany. He's originally from Germany, and then they moved to Africa, and then they moved to California. He's the founder of Palantir. He's the founder of PayPal, and he's on the record as being anti-democratic. He's frankly anti-democratic, and he wields an enormous, outsized amount of power. Alex Carr, Curtis Yarvin. We go down the list of so many of them. Maybe not all of these uh, tech bros or techagarchs or whatever we're going to call them are are overtly anti-democratic, but they are concentrating power into very, very, very few people, and that's anti-democratic. Democracy or a constitutional republic means that the people rule, not by mob rule, but they select their leaders and they have a say and they rein in the power and they vote for people who are going to hold the checks and balances against this executive power. But it's really so much power is held in just a few hands. And that's perilous for our children's future and our grandchildren's future.
In your book, you have 11 hallmarks that appear again and again, and I thought it would be helpful for everyone watching to hear these hallmarks and a brief description and why they're so dangerous. You already mentioned scapegoating the vulnerable, blaming immigrants, minorities, other marginalized groups for society's problems in order to unify people against a common enemy. So we did that.
Right.
But let me just go down the list if I could, Melissa,
Yeah.
and you could give us assaulting the truth. Well, I mean, have we seen that time and time again now? And
Right.
these parallel universes where people espouse points of view, and I'm like, from the and by at the highest levels of government, not just people with social media accounts, but tell us about how that works in a creeping or galloping authoritarianism.
Or careening or
Yeah.
careening authoritarianism. I begin with assaulting truth because that's exactly where authoritarians begin. That's why I put that as my number one hallmark. If they can convince us not only that there are alternative facts, but that facts don't matter, that there is no truth. And you and I are talking with people all of the time that are saying, I don't even believe anything anymore. I don't believe anyone is speaking the truth. We're talking with people all the time like that. I'll bet our audience is too. That is the clincher, is not only that we're told a lie, but that we're told the truth doesn't exist. And if a common understanding of truth does not exist, democracy cannot stand. We have to have an understanding that there are facts, that we follow these facts, that they are knowable, that we share them, that they're basic norms that we live by, or or there's no way for a constitutional republic or a democracy to stand. So that's the first thing. And there are many methods that authoritarians use. They can sort of color things. They can say, well, somebody told me and people are saying, or they can just flagrantly make up schlock.
You know,
And you just make up schlock, just make up things, make up statistics. Say it
I
is a
always
White House.
I'm always reminded about Roy Cohn and who was really shaped Donald Trump and his public persona so
Yes.
significantly. And I keep wanting to watch the documentary I think it's called Get Me Roy Cohn, because I think he was like, "Never admit you're wrong, always,
Right.
lie, lie, lie." And
Mhm.
we can see how Donald Trump
Attack,
has
attack, attack. Yeah.
yeah,
Lie, lie,
yeah,
lie. Attack,
internalizing
attack.
and I wonder if a secondary purpose for this, assault on truth is to also, make people, to your point, like, I never believe anyone, to sow doubt and to dismiss expertise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it. Uh, and not only does that appeal to a certain base that doesn't want to do the hard work of figuring stuff out, of knowing stuff, but it dumbs down the whole population in a way. And as we're seeing right now with the measles, I'll just point to my own home state, the measles outbreak in Utah. All my Utah friends, I want you to hear me saying what I'm saying. This is a direct result of believing someone who not only eschews any sort of expertise, but presents himself as an expert with absolutely no scientific training whatsoever. And again, feeds lies, misinformation to the public. So we see the human cost, literally the human cost. We could talk a lot about this too. We could talk about all sorts of branches of science that have been flattened or neutered under this administration. The fallout of shutting down US aid, my friends that have devoted their lives to US aid, that sort of thing. Whole
You
other
also
topic.
see
But
it I think you also see it playing out in this, uh, constant attack on Anthony Fauci,
yes,
that we have witnessed in recent weeks. As I've said before, you know, Dr. Fauci probably made some mistakes. Perhaps he wasn't open-minded enough about the Wuhan lab leak. Maybe he closed schools for too long. Maybe he got a little starstruck during the pandemic and got off on, people like Barbara Streisand calling him. Whatever. But
right.
the level of vitriol and criticism and anger and rage directed at someone who's been a noble public servant for
Yes.
what? I don't even know, more 60 years probably. He's
Yeah.
85 years old.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, but I also think and by the way, it's all over the internet, and this just isn't true that Dr. Fauci knew that the COVID vaccine increased risk of miscarriage by 81%, and it's just not true.
This is not
But the
true.
level of certainty that people are using to express that on social media is bananas.
It is total banana splits. That's what it is. It is. It's just makes my jugular bulge. It makes my eyes pop out. And it makes it very challenging then to interact in a civil in
Right.
a civil way with people who espouse those beliefs. Yeah. And that's the great challenge that's before us. Let's go to the second.
Yeah,
Let's go
let's
to the
go the
second
second.
hallmark.
But yeah,
Yeah.
politicizing independent institutions. I'll just read well, why don't you tell us what that means?
Well, let's talk about the DOJ. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. Let's talk about firing civil servants right and left. This slew of civil servants, of watchdogs, of watchdogs out the door and then replacing them with loyalists. This is precisely the sort of thing that, again, I'm coming from many, many years living in Germany, and I studied this and I've taught this, but I've observed it now through years of research in other countries that this is a typical thing. You get rid or you neuter the independence of the courts, of the press, of watchdogs. You get all of your loyalists in there, and then no one can rein in the person that's sitting in the highest office. We're watching that right now. I love it when you have Liz Oyer on because she's spoken a lot about the Todd Blanche. Uh, I guess I don't know, even it's so heartbreaking for me, but for him to be now the AG and the 1,200 former members of the DOJ that wrote letters pleading that he would not be given that position. I mean, the politicization of these bodies that should remain apolitical is typical of what we've seen in many other countries. Happened in Poland, happened in Hungary, and it's happening right under our noses. Because again, authoritarianism is not going to come by force. It comes by fear and by law very often. Things are made legal. And if you can capture the courts, you've done half the work. You know what
Although
I'm
the
saying?
courts, I mean, have you been heartened at time? I mean, when you've seen the courts step
Yes.
up, I feel
Yes.
like they're the last bastion of sanity in our
I think
country,
so.
and you have seen judges, even those appointed by Republican presidents, step up and say, "No, you can't do this. I can't, say chapter and verse all these decisions." But sometimes it's like, huh, the judges are doing their job.
Yes, those local judges or any of the mid-tier judges are doing it. And every time, I think what we can do, if people are wondering, what can I do? We're sliding so quickly or galloping or careening, whatever verb we want to use. What can I do? One thing we can do is we can loudly applaud those people who are growing a spine, who are showing a spine. Loudly applaud them. Talk with people about it. Wasn't that great that this person stood up to an illegal order or to a really fishy sort of suit? Isn't that great? Write them letters, draw attention to that. Not only so that the recipient feels heartened, but so that we do it publicly and we give one another hope.
I should
I
do
love,
that more. I should do that
yeah,
more. I'm going to do that more. Let me
yeah,
move on only because we have a lot to get through. Consolidating
I know.
executive power. Of course, we've been talking about the unitary executive theory that Donald Trump has sort of embraced, hook, line, and
Yes.
sinker, if you will. And it's using
Mhm.
it's not only it's using crises or emergencies to justify expanding executive authority, turning temporary powers into permanent ones. But it's even more than that, isn't it, Melissa?
Yeah,
Isn't it a
it is.
philosophy of
Yes.
sort of divided government? It reminds me of George Orwell. All pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal
Some
than
more
others. I
equal
mean,
than
even though
others.
that was more about communism, but you think about Donald Trump has really redefined what it means to be the chief executive of the United
Mhm.
States with this unitary executive theory. Is that right? What
I
it's
remember
called?
yeah, and the unitary executive theory or whatever we want to call it, we don't have to get worried about the semantics, but it's central to Project 2025, right? Project 2025 is very overt, very clear about handing much more power to the executive. We saw in just the first couple of days of this administration how many executive orders where you can just sort of rule by dictate, by
Right.
whim. And the reason why in my book specifically, you're right to say that it's more than what I described there, but the reason I zeroed in on emergency powers is because there is buzz. There is buzz about him calling on emergency powers, the
To
Insurrection
cancel
Act,
the election.
whatever it is, because I think it was in a recent interview that somebody said, couldn't you just claim or pronounce the emergency powers, the Emergency Act? Hmm, that might be an interesting idea. Yeah, we know what he does when he says that might be an interesting idea. Nobody had ever talked about that before. So this is a real thing. We watched it in different countries, in El Salvador under Bukele. We've seen it in a number of South American countries where you just proclaim emergency power and you get it extended and extended and extended. She's going to be temporary. She's going to be like this for maybe 6 months or so. 6 years later, that democratically elected leader is now a demagogue, a despot. He's reigning, reigning without any checks or or balances. In German, there's a term for it. You'll excuse me for dropping in the German terms, but it's called Dauerkrise, which literally means a perpetual crisis. So you go from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. And it's one of the things that the mustache man here in Germany used. It's exactly what he did to
I just interviewed Timothy. Yeah, well, you're talking about Hitler, obviously. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead. Tell me what you're going to say. Uh-oh.
he's brilliant. Are we still there?
Yeah, we're still there. You just froze for a second. You were talking about Hitler and what he did before.
Yeah. that was precisely, if you just interrupted if you just interviewed Timothy Snyder, then he's really a specialist on this. He's somebody that I've read. I think I've read everything that he's published. That was precisely what Hitler did. Just that we need to have, I have emergency powers, and then they turn into, with another vote, turned into making him into a dictator. So that move is quiet, but it's slick, it's surreptitious, and we have to be alert. We have to be very alert about that.
But not
Okay.
necessarily quiet and surreptitious, because Timothy Snyder talked about Viktor Orban faking a terrorist attack but during the election. And
Hmm.
he said we all need to be very cognizant. He claimed that he believes that Donald Trump is hoping the Iranians will actually launch a terrorist attack that will somehow disrupt the elections. Um,
Hmm.
or if that doesn't happen, and he said he doesn't think that's going to happen because Donald Trump wants it to happen. The Iranians don't want to do anything that Donald Trump wants them to do. But he claims that there's a strong possibility, and this is not surreptitious or quiet, that they will fabricate a terrorist attack or a terrorist threat, I think is more likely, right? And
Right,
that
right,
will be a way to call on emergency powers that will then disrupt the midterm elections.
right, right. Although you and I don't want to discourage people too much and say, it's going to be mayhem, there aren't going to be any. Our whole message is get out there and plan and vote
Oh,
no
yeah.
matter what. Yeah.
I think he just wants people to be aware of it and cognizant of it. So if this kind of happens, they will be skeptical, and
Yes.
they won't necessarily say, hair on fire. I don't know. It's a pretty interesting and scary theory. Let me move
Yes.
on to
Yeah.
silencing dissent, which I think uh, some Julia's writing. Oh, he said the reason it didn't work in Hungary because no one believed it.
No one
Uh,
believed it. That's right.
right.
They already knew that this man was criminal and involved in all sorts of things. They had long since lost their confidence in him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said Julia's writing to me, they all just laughed essentially. And that's why Timothy Snyder wants us to be aware of this possibility. So thank you,
Yes.
Julia, for that. I like
Yeah,
to
I
talk
think
to
that's
my
wise.
producers on.
We love Julia. Julia
Yeah.
is on top of everything.
Yeah. So you mentioned, in a way, assaulting truth and silencing dissent kind of go hand in hand. You talk about intimidating, censoring, or punishing critics, protesters, journalists, and political appointments to discourage opposition. We have seen that chapter and verse going on.
That's right. It starts with using language that, I'm going to bring it back to my German context, that was authored by Hitler and his regime. Have you ever heard the term enemies of the people?
Of
Have you
course,
ever
yeah.
heard have you ever heard the lying press? That's Volksfeind, that was the enemy of the people, is a Nazi term. Lügenpresse, the lying press, is a Nazi term. Now, I'm not drawing a perfect equivalency here. What I'm saying is the
Why
mechanisms
not?
are the same. The mechanisms are the same. The 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 narrowing the aperture for information is the whole point, with the press at least, right? If we can discount the press, if we can convince everybody that the only place where you are going to get truth is from moi and moi alone, you narrow that aperture, then again, that is another lack of checks and balances. The press is a part of a functioning democracy. You have to have a whole body of fact checkers for everything that anybody that has political office holds. So, and when you're afraid to post something online, let's say, when you're afraid of showing up at a peaceful demonstration, again, back to one of my original comments, if you're facing fear like that you shouldn't be facing, then you know that you're facing authoritarianism.
And I think the word or the term anticipatory obedience is or anticipatory compliance or whatever. The idea of having a chilling effect, people being fearful to present the facts and to speak the truth because they're worried about the ramifications. That's happening
Yes.
in corporate media in our
Absolutely.
country. I worked at CBS, and what's happening there, I think, is absolutely shameful because there is this second guessing of journalists and trying to massage the truth so it will be less offensive to the administration.
Right.
And I think that's incredibly scary that that's going on. But I think this is a result of the efforts to silence dissent, or this is the result of corporate interests and journalistic integrity being,
Yes.
not being aligned, right? So anyway,
Yes, exactly.
we did hijacking faith is another one, using religion to legitimize political power, portraying the leader's agenda as morally or divinely ordained. We have seen Donald Trump present himself as Jesus Christ on social media. And in your book, you write that hijacking faith is one of the hallmarks. And as a person of faith yourself, I was curious what you make of the rise of Christian nationalism we've been seeing in American politics. And is there anything similar going on in Germany?
Mm, that's a very good question. Let me answer the first one. Um, Christian nationalism is not a religion. It's not about religion. It's about power, and we saw it also in Germany, and we've seen it in many other countries. But it's about power. It's not about religion. It uses all of the trappings of religion, the language, the ritual, the community, um, even the commandments, to and the iconography, like the president memeing himself as Christ. For a person of faith, that is deeply, deeply, deeply offensive, um, for many reasons. But it hijacks what Christian nationalism does, and it is on the rise, is that it uses people's goodwill and people's faith, people's believing heart, and their authoritarian tendencies, their patterns of following authoritarian power in other contexts to build a base. That's what it is. It builds a base. Is it happening in Germany as well? Probably. Yes. Yes, because it goes hand in hand. And if it isn't at the same degree here that it is in the US, it goes hand in hand with the rise of authoritarianism. Everywhere we saw it. We saw it under Bolsonaro in Brazil. He used religion, he used religious places when he went out campaigning and used religious language and rhetoric to sort of stir people up and galvanize people. So it's something to watch for. And just one thing for anybody who is a person of faith out there. Remember that authoritarians are not loyal to anybody but themselves, really, and people who prop them up. As soon as you are not convenient for them or don't fulfill their needs, you're dismissed. And so, if there's anyone out there of faith that thinks, well, I'm Christian, I'm going to be on the right team, right? That didn't happen in Germany. Didn't happen in Germany. Religion was used, and it was a very narrow, narrow definition of what religion was. It was a political tool, and anybody who didn't fall in line was kicked out, was threatened. Some people gave their lives. Some people were executed because they wouldn't fall in line with that narrow, politicized interpretation of Christianity. A lot we could talk about there.
The another hallmark is indoctrinating youth. And I think this is an interesting one because maybe it's the company I keep, but the youth I know are actually rejecting the Trump administration full stop. But I guess if you look at things like Turning Point USA, or you look at some of these young women saying they'd be willing to give up their right to vote, or, the whole trad wife movement. Where does that come in as you see it?
There was a term for that in German. In German, it's called Lebensborn because he begins with, right, not only being part of this youth group that is defining what it means to be German. And again, they were coming from this terribly humiliating, broken apart post World War I period. It was tragic what had happened to the people and the Versailles Treaty and everything. And so this was an opportunity for them to be separated from their parents and find identity and belonging in this proud Germanness, right? And the term also that that accompanies that. It was an entire project that the National Socialists put into place, was called Lebensborn. And Lebensborn was literally, we are going to reward people for having more babies that look like us. We're going to reward
That
financially.
sounds eerily familiar with this effort to procreate, and I think that's in Project 2025 too, right?
Yes, yes. Again, a response to this fear, the supposed fear of white replacement. We need to have more babies that look like, well, look, like you and like me. And, but it was a central program for the National Socialists in Germany. Lebensborn is what it was. Women got medals. They were held up as the ideal German woman if they had more babies so that they could outnumber anybody, any other race.
So, from your perspective, looking at our country from Germany, do you see this indoctrinating youth, winning over young people through propaganda, grievance, and identity, often by offering belonging and purpose? Do you see that happening in the United States?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in that chapter, I go on and I talk quite a bit about the manosphere. There's been a
Right.
lot of research about that. So it's online belonging. In here in Germany, it was taking children away from their families, isolating them, and taking them to camps. The Bund Deutscher Mädel, it was the group for young women, and then there was the Hitlerjugend that was for the boys. And I always want to be careful at this point. I want to say I'm not equating turning point with the Hitlerjugend. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying the mechanism of of trying to build a sense of identity that's based in maybe some good concepts. Let's be proud, let's be healthy, let's be disciplined, all of this. But underneath it is this a danger, this throbbing danger of preparing kids, pulling them into this far right ideology. And the manosphere is an online place where that happens. We do that more
Yeah.
online now, right? Than going to
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
camp in the woods someplace.
I wasn't thinking about that, but you're absolutely right. And when you were talking about Germany and the state it was in pre, the rise of the Third Reich, I was thinking about sort of parallels of economic struggles in the U.S. I think of income inequality, the cratering of the middle class,
Yep. Yes.
people for the first time feeling their kids are not going to be as successful or more successful than their parents. And if you see sort of parallels between pre-Nazi Germany and pre-MAGA US.
Yes, I do see some parallels. I do see some parallels. There's great economic disparity in the US, tremendous economic disparity. And a lot of the people who are struggling check to check to check are those who are looking for some sort of a savior. And because fearful and desperate people, they'll sign anything, won't they? And I think that they're drawn also by this idea of, well, this leader made a lot of money and is a corporate success, right? And so certainly he will pull us out of this trench. But I also want to be very careful and say there is a limit in those parallels because Germany was devastated in a way that we haven't seen. It was an utter and complete collapse. And the reason I can talk about that with any authority is because my father-in-law happened to be living in Germany uh, as as an American um, in 1932, 1933, 1934, and I possess his journals. So he
Oh,
describes the kind of desperation that people were living in: emotional, social fracture, violence in the streets, tremendous economic hardship, just devastation after World War I. And so his journals helped me to understand, and his copy of Mein Kampf, by the way, he got one so he could figure out what is all the buzz about. And it didn't take him very long to figure out the hatred that ran like blood throughout that entire book. But his journals describe that complete humiliation that the entire German population was experiencing. That made them vulnerable, made them anxious to find a savior, to find anything, and to blame somebody else. Of course, their economic devastation was going to be the fault of this
Jews.
cultural or ethnic group. Yeah, of course. Or this myth that they were stabbed in the back, that it was insiders that had made them lose World War I, etc. But there are parallels that we can learn from too, that behavior has its reasons, and people sort of grip onto MAGA and its ideology for a reason. For a reason, it has a lot to do with fear. It has a lot to do with feeling left out. There are a number of reasons that we could talk about for hours and hours, but I think we're only on hallmark number 4 or 5, right?
No, we're 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 almost done, and we have, like, a few more, but I was thinking, I think resentment too, like, envy is so
Yes.
and I think when there's much disparity, it just breeds a lot of resentment and anger and, a feeling of this will this will never happen for me. And that's such
Mm,
a powerful and corrosive emotion, I think, but also an incredibly motivating uh, emotion that fuels so much rage and anger. Okay, let me get. I'm digressing. Okay.
mhm.
Oh gosh. Well, maybe we can just do a quick thing on each of these because we've been talking for an hour. And I,
Oh,
anyway,
I've got all evening for you, Katie.
okay, controlling knowledge. This is really, really bugging the shit out of me, Melissa, what's
Yeah,
happening with
yeah,
our history, which what's happening to how history is being told, sanitizing certain things that have happened in our past, reshaping education. You also include attacking science in here, influencing
yes.
cultural institutions to control the public narrative. I'm doing a script that Julia and I are working on right now about what's happening at the Smithsonian and
Oh,
how, the president is saying that people are getting, a negative view of American history. Well, all of American history is not positive, Mr. President. And it is
right,
just like what they're doing to try to, I don't understand, I don't understand why people can't comprehend the importance of learning from your mistakes and seeing what we've done in the past to try to be better in the
right,
future. And so
right.
I I it really makes me mad. I guess as somebody who majored in American studies and my daughter's getting her PhD in history now, just that
Uh,
they're trying to distort and pervert. Well, it's also kind of intersects with this thing about facts and truth, right?
yeah, absolutely. And remember being the operative word. I'll come back to remember, but if you control the past, you can control the future. So authoritarians want to tell a whole new story. They want to make up a whole mythic concept of who we are, who we were, who we're going to be. It's always this nostalgia going back to the great old days. With Erdogan in Turkey, they want to go back to the Ottoman Empire when they were really great, you know? And I don't know where this great golden age is that the current administration wants to go back to, but there is this longing for nostalgia because it's a myth. It's a myth, and you can get people sort of stirred up about this certain myth, but there's no substance to it at all. And it makes me nuts. In fact, I think I did maybe 5 or 6 reels just on the overtake of the Smithsonian alone because I was gobsmacked. How can this be happening? This premier institution being, like you said, perverted. If you can change the past, you can change the future. That's why remembering, I wanted to get back to this word, remembering is a form of resistance. So I suggest that everybody out there, you take pictures of everything that's in the Smithsonian as it is right now. Be a record keeper. Go into the journals. Take pictures and photos and keep private private chronologies of what is happening now. Because as a number of my followers have pointed out to me, it's one of the first things that authoritarians do is that they just erase records. Just erase records and they make up
Or
a
burnt
whole
books.
hello. I live outside of Frankfurt. I can take you when you come visit me, Katie, and you're always invited. I'll take you to the place where they stacked thousands of copies and doused them with lighter fluid and then set them on fire. Mark Twain, Ernest Hemingway, you know, great literature, but it was Einstein. They burned it all. You can burn books and you can ban books. On that place, I know I'm digressing a little bit, but this is worth noting. On that place in Frankfurt, in the very center of town, there's a big embossed plaque. And that plaque has words around it that were written by a famous German author. His name is Heinrich Heine. It's from a piece that he wrote many decades before the book burning actually happened on that very spot. And it says, Das war, do you mind if I say this in German?
No,
Are people going
please.
to hate me? Here we
No,
go.
no, no. We
Das,
won't hate you because you speak German, Melissa.
okay. Das war ein Vorspiel nur. Dort, wo man Bücher verbrennt, verbrennt man am Ende auch Menschen. And it means that was just a prologue. Wherever they burn books, they will eventually burn people. That is from a piece of literature written decades before the actual book burning, before in the same time frame that Dachau was opened. So I just think, well, where they ban books, they're also going to ban people. That's also what's going to happen. So I think that you and I are absolutely on the same wavelength.
Well, I thought that where John and I stayed in Berlin, there was a plaza outside our hotel where there was also a book burning. Am
Mhm.
I getting, because I don't think we went to Frankfurt. I think we just went to Berlin.
But the point is, it was all over Germany. It
Hmm.
was from the north to the south. There were many book burnings, all in the same 24-hour period. Just like Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, it all happened in the same, it was synchronized to terrorize people, to make a big theatrical show out of it.
We have three more of Hallmarks, and then I'm going to ask
Okay.
you a sort of a broad question. By the way, this has been so interesting. And I wanted to mention that. Oops, sorry, you guys. That a teacher wrote in. She said, uh, Marcy Prager. Hi, Marcy. I think she said, I now I can't. Oh, now I can't find your comment, Marcy, but it was about teaching. And she said that teachers are, I'm trying to remember what she said about how she's a retired teachers and teachers are really afraid
Great.
of what
Yeah.
they're teaching. And she said she's retired, but oh, here it is. Thank you, Julia. I'm a teacher. Um, and teachers have to be careful what they present. I'm a retired, and I'm retired and teach online authentic history. Um, I think again, this sort of intimidation, it's very interesting because some of these all kind of morph into the other ones, these hallmarks. But this intimidation is happening in schools when it comes to history and
Yep.
with this whole idea of controlling knowledge and squashing dissent or what they consider dissent, right?
Yep. It doesn't take much to be considered a dissenter these days. The margins are getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And another thing we can do is when teachers stand up for true history, like Marcy, or when they present books that might be somewhere on some banned book list, like The Diary of Anne Frank, for goodness sake, or Toni Morrison's wonderful books, or Isabel Wilkerson's fabulous books, or George Orwell, that we can actually publicly say, thank you for teaching correct history. Thank you. I applaud you. I'm grateful for brave teachers. And we post that publicly and we go to a school board meeting and we actually say that we appreciate that. Those are just little steps that we can take as citizens to make sure that those who are being brave, showing some courage and some spine, get our support.
I agree. Okay, three more. Corrupting elections. Duh.
Hello. Yeah.
Well, I'll just read what you wrote, and then we'll go through. We'll just go through them quickly. And I want people to get your book so they can read more about this. We can't give it all away. Corrupting election, manipulating election rules, spreading disinformation, suppressing voters, hello, SAVE Act, that was me, or undermining confidence in election outcomes while preserving the appearance of democracy. Isn't it
Yep.
interesting that under it's sort of the guise of making sure they're free and fair elections, that basically that the whole intent is to rig the election. And I don't get why people don't see that happening before their eyes.
Right, right. Well, sort of like if we go back to assaulting truth, the point is not to tell the lie in and of itself, and that people believe the lie. It's to tell so many competing stories that people just go, I don't even understand this anymore. So I'm just going to sit home and let other people vote. It's to get us exhausted, Katie. It's to get us confused and exhausted and defeated before November ever comes up. So guess what I'm posting on like every other day? We had better get ourselves registered. You better check and make sure that your address is current. You better make sure you have a voting plan, plan A, plan B, plan C. These are all things that I include besides all this historical background. I give action plans, like 30 something action plans of things that anyone can do. They have 10 minutes, 10 hours, or 10 weeks. Literally hand holding. Here is your guidebook for things to do right now. And there's a whole bunch that's just on election activity.
I wish I mean, I also wish election day could be a national holiday, but that's something that I feel like would be just great and people I would hope it would increase turnout levels, but who knows. Okay, plundering wealth.
And
This is, I mean, we're seeing this out the wazoo. Rewarding loyalists through corruption. Hello, I'm not going to name names, but I could. Cronyism, kleptocracy, which I don't quite know what that means. I looked it up recently and now I forget, while using public
Mhm.
resources for private gain.
So a kleptocrat, it comes from the Greek, comes from the Greek that means to be a thief, a thief. And crony is a friend. So if you have old friends who are also thieves and you're as thick as thieves, then you have kleptocracy and cronyism. So it's kleptocracy is that you're using your public office to make money. And cronyism is, and we don't need
You-
to name any names,
You're
but they
helping
all
your
start with
friends. You're helping your friends or people who
you
suck.
might, for instance, here's an example from Hungary. Viktor Orban had a best friend from high school who was a plumber, a pipe fitter, something like that. He ended up being the wealthiest man in Hungary because Viktor Orban gave him all of these no bid contracts for everything, for everything. And he became this mogul. This plumber, this pipe fitter, became a mogul. And we see that perhaps we could look at the reflecting pool, that it was a no bid contract as well. It was a shoddy job. We know that now. That's simply the fact. And but it was the contract was overpaid for whoever his Mar-a-Lago friend was who
Right. There was
did
no
that job.
bid. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh,
Okay.
okay, and rewarding loyalists through corruption. Obviously, that's why all these tech titans are going to the inauguration and sucking up to him, and you know, because there's something in it for them, right?
Of course, it's quid pro quo. It's transactional. There's not public service in there. It's self-service. That's what it turns into. It's self-service. It's when I think of people that are gasping when they're going to the gas pump, they can barely stand how much they're paying at the gas pump. But 30,000 feet overhead is a luxury jet, and we're paying for that gas. We're paying for the gas in that luxury jet. We need to help people make the connection between that sort of financial corruption and affordability. That the reason why we are struggling to make ends meet and going to the third job and can't even imagine buying a house has to do with the people who are hoarding wealth. And if you look very carefully, they're at the center of power in our politics right now.
And we're last but not least,
Yeah.
stoking chaos. Here we go. I mean, this is so fascinating and yet also so depressing. Exploiting division, fear, polarization, or violence to convince people that only a strong leader can restore order. I
Mhm.
mean, this to me is sort of the mother of all the hallmarks, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the world's a mess. It's good that the world's a mess, and I can make it better. But does anyone really, I guess there are people who believe that Donald Trump and his cronies can make it better, but how I mean, why aren't they learning that his claims to make it better are falling flat and their lives aren't better? Why
And do we
this
feel
why this undying loyalty towards a man who obviously only cares about lining his own pockets and making his family and perhaps a handful of friends rich, but that he doesn't really care, and but more importantly, their lives haven't gotten better.
right?
Why do they hang on to this?
Because it's an illusion, and illusions are easier to keep a hold of than messy facts. It's that. It's just it's illusory, it's hopeful, it's and there's a lot that I write about in the book about having this shared sense of identity. It's a very safe place. And so you keep on holding on to that illusion. And remember, you talked at the very top of this hour together about two separate planets. There are really separate planets that we're living on as far as information is concerned. And we're receiving, or the people that are still holding on to that last hope that this is going to work out for them, they're getting a different message than the rest of the people are. When I watched when I watched some ex MAGA people admit that they had never ever seen any footage of January 6th, and then they saw it and it changed everything, I thought, hmm, if they can live this long and never see that footage and never know that truth, that raw,
Right.
monstrous truth, then what other things are they missing? So it's for me, I'm not trying to understand so much why people are still holding on. What I'm trying to do very much, the trifecta that I drive with is educate, motivate, and activate, is that let's understand what's going on, let's understand the patterns, and then let's motivate one another, and then we need to take action. And I don't think our best investment of time and energy is trying to understand why people are still part of the MAGA cult. I think our best expenditure of our time and our resources and our goodwill is spent with the persuadables. It's with the persuadables, getting those people who have moved out of that faithful and loyal following and recognize that a lot of people are hurting, that democracy is teetering, 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 and we take action. And that action can be very simple. It doesn't have to be that all of us show up and get, sprayed with bear spray at a demonstration. Somebody's going to do that, and some people can do that. But there are many other things that we can do because I firmly believe, I firmly believe that democracy begins not in the White House, but in our house. It begins in our house. It begins in our streets. It's in our trusted relationships. It can be our action for the day can be as simple as let's counter an untruth in a calm and caring way, and let's just nip misinformation in the bud. Let's try to make connections with other people, join with organizations that are already doing the work. Let's watch Katie. Let's make sure that we are getting all the correct information, and then go out and act in our streets. And again, my book has what differentiates it from others is that it has all of these action plans. So you and I and anyone can do something as of day one. As of day one, we must
Y-
do it.
And I think you've answered this question, but I'll just sort of ask it rhetorically. You
Mhm.
know, I do feel like it feels gradual. I mean, or I guess that we've become inured to the daily erosion of our democratic ideals and institutions. And it does
Yes.
feel like you're the frog in the proverbial boiling water.
Mhm.
Is that a hallmark of not only flooding the zone, as Steve Bannon would say, but kind of like relentlessly, along with distraction, by the way, like, oh, we're going to start a war, so don't look at our how much money we've made in the first year
Look
of,
over there, look over there, and then you're
yeah.
doing all of the magic over here. Yes.
But is it? In fact, there was a question here, and now I can't find it that Julia had written about. Oh, here it is. A lot of people think democracies die through dramatic revolutions or military coups, and you say they are more likely to erode slowly, almost invisibly. and that
Mhm,
you
mhm.
say gradual change is much more dangerous than dramatic
Yes.
change. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I feel like, yes, because people don't notice it.
That's why it's our job to help people notice. That's why it's our job to say, this is not normal. That can be an action item too, to just call it right out and say, this is not normal. It's the slow normalization. It's the slow normalization. We just have to stop for a moment and we have to think of any action that we've just experienced in the last 10 days, Katie. Any statements from the White House, whatever, and then just what does Washington, D.C. even look like right now? Let's start with that. All of the gold plating, the the torn apart East Wing, the revamping of what the Rose Garden looks like. If we were to go back 2 years and say, if that had happened then, we would have been up in arms. We would have been up in arms. But the normalization happens incrementally. The frog in the boiling pot is a great analogy. So we need to throw cold water in our faces and in the faces of everyone else and say, here is where we are right now. A globally recognized, excellent institution called VDEM, which stands for Varieties of Democracy, based in Sweden. So they're not partisan, they're not Democrat or Republican, they're not American. They're an independent academic institution. For years and years and years, they've been tracking democracies. Guess what they have just said about the US? The US used to be somewhere around 20 out of the 170 democracies in the world. So they're watching to see what things happen, like these 11 hallmarks that are threatening a healthy democracy. In the last year, we have experienced the most precipitous and the fastest drop of VDEM's rating of the US. It's now around 51, 50, somewhere in the 50s. It's fallen like that. This is an independent institution that's saying we can't even call it a liberal democracy anymore. It's an electoral democracy or it's a competitive authoritarian system. That's where we are. And I hate to end on that
No,
heavy,
don't worry.
heavy note.
Well, we're not ending yet because I have a
Yeah,
couple
okay.
other things. I love my followers. Hi, Jay Smart. Brilliant presentation. Thank you. I agree 100% with every single point of discussion. How do I, as a commoner, fight the fight and make a difference? And I think again, that's my most often asked question by people when I do these interviews is, what can we do? What can we do? And I just want to add to that question, a very smart question from Substack, and because people take the time to write these, and I hate to not
No, I
not give
love
that
it.
not
I
give
love
them
it.
an airing. Someone wrote, I don't know, Julia, if you know the name of this person, I'd love to know it so I could just refer to them. But on Substack, we have witnessed South Korea refuse authoritarianism, thwarting the attempt in days. We see Armenia in the streets for consecutive days to protest the government dealing with with the
Oh,
Kushners, I
Albania.
assume.
Yeah, Albania. Right,
Albania,
that's right.
sorry,
Albania.
Albania,
Mhm.
sorry. I think maybe either that was a typo or a mistake. What
Sure,
do,
sure, 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 sure.
why does it look like America is allowing democracy to die without massive resistance? Are we too big to organize? Um, yeah, Albania, I think that was a typo. Uh,
Sure, sure,
uh,
sure.
uh,
I don't mean
um,
to correct
no,
anybody, but
no,
I'm
no,
just
no. No, please. I'm glad you did. Are we too big to organize? We obviously can't depend on Congress to protect us. So what do we do? Another version of that. People are really upset and they're dismayed, to put it mildly, and they don't know what to do.
Mhm. So here's what we're gonna do. I think that in our gut, we know that we need to do something. We need to take action. The easiest thing or the most immediate thing that we can do is talk. We need to talk about these things. And that means we're going to have to overcome our comfort zone. I know that people say, we don't talk about politics, or I'm never going to mention that at my family reunion, or I can't do that at work, I can't do it at church. Then don't talk about politics. Talk about issues where you stand on the same little patch of grass. Do you care about your kids' education? Do you care about safety of your community? Do you care about the environment? Pick something that you have in common with someone and talk about that, but don't use political terms. You'll give yourself away. So talk about something, talk about it in human terms. Just say, can we talk really honestly about what we're seeing? Because I'm watching the ice people are now getting like electric shock gloves. What if I'm there and they grab me or somebody else, you know? So we find common ground. Don't couch it in political terms. Talk about human issues, things that you have in common. We talk, we speak. It would also keep us from normalizing this stuff. If we are silent, it becomes more normalized. Language is like a bulwark. It will stop it when we say it, when we speak it, when we just utter it. Just say, this is not normal. Just that much. This is not normal, or
Or
that is not true.
or maybe like, "I'm scared, and this is why. I'm
Yes,
worried, and this is why." I
yes.
think, if you hopefully appeal luckily, I'm having a family reunion not this weekend, but next weekend. I'm happy to report everyone in my family is on the same page as I am. Thank God. I don't know what I would
Mm.
do. I don't know what I would do.
Well,
But
I have a
anyway,
lot of friends. I have a lot of friends that go with great trepidation to their family reunions, and they
yeah, I
come
know.
away from church weeping, and they say, "I'm separated from my kids, from my parents, from my neighbors. I feel like the nutcase because I'm so isolated." We need to find ways to somehow, and I'm working on it too. I'm working on it too. Engage in these conversations where we find a common patch of ground, something. And I love your language, just saying, I'm really scared. I'm scared about this. I'm really worried. It might not be touching people that you look like you and like me right now, Katie, but history tells us it will touch us all eventually. We might think, well, I'm not an immigrant. I'm not, right? I don't I look I look like somebody who's got everything together in their life. But I'll tell you about my dear friend. My dear friend, I won't give away too much about her identity. She's a very dear friend. She is a brilliant, brilliant PhD. And she was a refugee herself from an Eastern European country, fled through Austria and ended up in the United States. Well, she has just recently left the United States. She's left because she says, things are moving so quickly. I can't be certain that somebody with my background is going to be safe. If you have any member of your family who has a green card, whatever, how do you know that they're going to be safe? Besides those, so many other things that we could talk about that will touch everyone. It touches everyone eventually. So, action items are to talk, to be very open and vulnerable. I'm scared about this. And tell stories about people that you know. When my mother, my widowed 92-year-old mother, the guys who come and cut her grass every other week, when they just didn't show up anymore, she was very, very concerned and nobody could track down what happened to them. That touches my mother's life. It's like it's like vapor, these people just disappearing. These are real human stories, and we need to humanize and let people feel how how perilous this is for us. And I also suggest that we just not allow ourselves to be isolated. Sometimes it helps just to have this online connection like this, but also to have real life connection with people. I write a whole bunch in the book about something called a democracy defense pod. It sounds so utterly cheesy, but just give me a break. I call it a DDP because everyone will remember it. And it's just getting your people together, and you hold one another accountable, and you meet every other week or every week and you say, okay, this thing, we're going to show up. Have you ever written an op-ed? You've never written an op-ed? Melissa shows us how to write an op-ed. Oh, you've never spoken at a town hall? Melissa writes out exactly how we're going to go prepare ourselves to speak at a town hall, that sort of thing. In your group, your homies, your besties, you hold each other accountable, and you watch out for one another's mental health, because
Yeah, and you take a
everyone
break when you
you take
need
a
to,
break
because you cannot, uh, you know, you just cannot be
constantly, constantly.
marinating in this stuff 24/7. You have to like go outside, be with friends, watch a stupid TV show, read a book, stuff like
Yeah.
that. I'm not going to ask you about the DSA because that's a whole hour conversation, because that's the big
Mhm.
topic, especially with recent midterm elections, or, primaries rather, leading to the midterms, about
Yeah,
the direction of the Democratic Party, about the Democratic Socialists of America, progressive versus centrist. Well, let's do that another time, because I would love
I'd love
to
to.
hear your perspective. You're so smart and thoughtful, and I love listening to you. Everyone follow oh, and I wanna make sure I repeat the name of the book. My lefty prof, who's another follower who I love, wanted to make sure that I said the name of your book. It is called How to Save Democracy: The Anti-Authoritarian Playbook. It comes
Yeah.
out on September 15th. Can people pre-order it now?
You'd better pre-order it because the whole first printing is already sold out, and that's thousands
Wow,
and thousands of books.
congratulations.
I'm so great. Do you know what I think really helped people? They saw your very gracious and generous endorsement on the front cover. So Katie Couric, everybody, wrote this beautiful, just on point endorsement on the cover of my book. I can't thank you enough. I can't tell you how much
Of
that means to me.
course. Well, listen, I it comes from a very pure and sincere place where you guys, Melissa does. I'm sure a lot of people on here probably follow you already, but if they don't, you really need to follow Melissa. It's Melissa Dalton-Bradford on Instagram and on other platforms because, in a very obviously, she's a beautiful, elegant, highly intelligent person, but she's able to really, just give you information and perspective and context, which I think is so helpful when we're all so inundated with information. And I think, as I said at the start of our conversation that began, I think last year, that
That's right.
what is so great is that you have this perspective from across the Atlantic Ocean, from Europe. You have a knowledge of what sort of happening globally because you are, as I said, an international woman of mystery, and you kind of have that understanding. I find it really valuable, and I really love watching your videos. So I'm glad we were
Thank
finally
you
able to do this. It's what time in
so
Germany is
much.
it? Is it 7:30 now?
I think it's about 7:30, something like that. Yeah, I'm looking out the windows, it looks like 7:30. It is. I can't
Yeah.
imagine a better way to spend my evening. If people want to find me on Substack, it's Melissa Dalton Bradford, and if they wanna go to Instagram, where I've got over 600 reels and counting, it's MDB Global Mom, MDB, my initials, Global Mom. And then the book can be purchased anywhere where books are sold, you're gonna find it. Plus, I did an audiobook. I recorded an audiobook so that you could feel my passion right through your earbuds. So I hope that people
Well, that's
I hope
awesome.
people
And again, thank you so much. Oh yeah, Julia just said your IG handle, MDB. Good. Julia is all over it today.
he is on
Um,
top of this like nobody's business.
yeah. Well, I'm so lucky to have people like Julia on my team. And my whole editorial team and
They are
we have a
great.
whole we well, but we also have other people who work at Katie Kirk Media, who write our newsletters, who do partnerships so that we can pay our salaries and create the kind of content we want to create. And if you all enjoyed this conversation and you feel like it and you want some exclusive content, please consider being a paid subscriber. I don't know, Melissa, if that's something that you would like
Yeah,
to for your
yeah,
Substack
the
as
same
well.
thing. Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we have the unpaid subscribers and the paid subscribers. Yeah,
But I
and
highly recommend you guys definitely subscribe and even support Melissa's work because she's doing really important stuff
thank you.
and try to support us as well. We're trying our
Abs
best.
absolutely. You're doing phenomenal work. You're doing
Well,
essential
thanks.
work. And I love that your team's all women too. I just want to say that. The ones that
Yeah.
I've interacted with, I love that. I think it's
Yeah,
great.
my husband's a CEO, but we're very female heavy at our
Yeah,
company, and it's great. But
I love it. Thank you.
time with us. This was a long, very substantive, meaty conversation, and I'm grateful that you all are as interested in what Melissa has to say as I am. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully, we can do this again sometime.
I would be honored. I'd be thrilled. We have a lot of stuff we haven't talked about yet. We could even,
Believe
I
it or
mean, so,
not.
so,
And
so
I
much.
can
But I
play
know that
another clip. I can play another clip from Cabaret. This
let's
is
do that.
called
Oh,
Very
let's
Low
sing.
Production Values. I
So
used to
I'm
yeah.
gonna send you, Katie, I'm gonna send you 3 books. I'll send you 4. I'll send you 4. I'll send you this one that your name is on the front of, and I'll send you Global Mom and On Loss and Let Me Tell You My Story, which is about refugee work. I'll send them all to you, and
Oh,
we'll
I
stay
would
in
love
touch
that.
because we have more conversations to have. Oh, and I'll put in some German chocolate for you too.
Oh, okay. I
Want
I
that?
I would definitely be excited to get that.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay. That's
all
going to be in
right.
the package. Okay.
Bye, Melissa. Take care, and thanks,
Bye.